Ever since he pled guilty 6 years ago, Michael Cohen has mounted a brutal campaign against Donald Trump.
I believe that Donald Trump has actually lost his He's lost his marble. He knows that every single thing that he has done for God knows how long is now coming, to his doorstep.
After relentless media hype, the one-time fixer and convicted liar took the stand at the hush money trial and said Trump had warned him before declaring his first presidential run that there's going to be a lot of women coming forward. When Cohen described how he passed $130,000 to Stormy Daniels, he recalled Trump caring only about suppressing the story past the election. Quote, he wasn't thinking about Melania. This was all about the campaign. Cohen said that when he was reimbursed for that and another hush money payment with 11 checks signed by Trump, the president knew these payments were not really for legal services. But Cohen's memory turned foggy under cross-examination. Trump lawyer Todd Blanche wasted time showing that Cohen wants his ex-boss behind bars, which is pretty obvious, but he scored points when Cohen admitted he wasn't sure about a key phone call he supposedly had with Trump, that he'd made over $3 million on 2 anti-Trump books, and when he had to repeat the litany of lies he's told to various investigators.
How did Cohen come off? Well, to me, like a well-rehearsed dunderhead. He explained away every unsavory action as motivated by his effort to, quote, protect Trump.
The ex-president's former fixer, Michael Cohen, today closed the loop on the story that often sounds like it is straight out of a bad mafia movie.
I don't think I've ever seen a star cooperating witness get his knees chopped out quite as clearly and dramatically as what just happened with Michael Cohen.
Now we're hearing this guy's really a dirtbag. He hates Donald Trump. And in the end, I think they're going to see him for what he is. He's a lying huckster who's looking for his 15 minutes of fame.
Trump regularly spoke to reporters and brought in such supporters as House Speaker Mike Johnson to defend him.
Today we had a very good day in court. You see what's happening. And you'll have to report it because I can't talk about it too much. Every single legal analyst, even CNN, even MSDNC, they're saying there's no case here.
Joining us now from Nashville, Clay Travis, co-founder of OutKick and a nationally syndicated radio host, and Marie Harf, Fox News contributor and former State Department spokeswoman. Clay, how was Michael Cohen, just as a prosecution witness, laying out the case, saying Donald Trump knew what the money was for, and Donald Trump also knew that Cohen was being reimbursed in a way that he argued, he knew exactly that this was for hush money and not for legal services?
Well, he was well coached in his direct prosecution testimony. I thought on the cross-examination he was blown up and this case should be over. Because remember, the standard is beyond a reasonable doubt. And when your star witness can't remember for sure whether or not he said what he said previously had occurred on a 96-second phone call when he called Trump's bodyguard and claims that he was talking about a payment, and now the evidence comes out that he may well have been actually talking about a 14-year-old kid who was harassing him. I think there's at least one, maybe 2 or 3 of the 12 jurors on this case who are going to not be willing to give a not guilty verdict. If this were a 100% honest jury, I think it would be 12-0 not guilty in favor of Trump.
Well, it only takes one juror for a mistrial. Marie, is the reason the Trump defense didn't challenge this core testimony about the checks and so forth is because they'd have to come up with a different version, and there are all these texts and emails and signal messages and bank records and one surreptitious audio tape?
I think most people believe that Donald Trump knew exactly what was happening. You don't hear a lot of people saying Donald Trump didn't know anything that Michael Cohen was doing. He didn't know this money was going to her. The question is whether it was a legal liability. So that's probably why the Trump team didn't do that. And Howie, what's so interesting about this case, it's so hard for us to read how the jury might be seeing things, of course, because we don't have cameras in the courtroom.
Right.
Reporters are in there and they're telling us what it's like. They're telling us how it's feeling. But it's so hard to gauge some of this because Michael Cohen was always always going to be an imperfect witness. We all knew that.
Yeah.
But the question is, to Clay's point, do jurors look at what he said and look at the defense poking holes in that and have doubt now? It's a little hard to tell.
Imperfect is very diplomatic. Clay, since those of us watching at home just got to watch the side panel with the reporter's notes and not hear anything, CNN engaged in a dramatic reading. Let's take a listen.
He goes, "How long do you think I will be on the market for?" Not long.
What did you understand that to mean?
He wasn't thinking about Melania. This was all about the campaign.
That went on for an hour. What do you think, Clay?
I love to see the minute-by-minute ratings on that. I can't imagine. They could have at least gotten great voice actors, maybe people playing the roles. So I don't imagine that's great television. But let's dive in here, building on the larger legal context. Remember, there has to be a second crime in order for this to be elevated to a felony. Otherwise, it's misdemeanor business bookkeeping issues. And to me, what Cohen has to do is he has to elevate that second crime. Now, there's a couple of different defenses that I think the Trump defense has put out. One is basically that this was designed not for election-related issues, but because Trump himself was concerned about how Melania would respond to the story. I think that's very compelling potentially to some jurors because it doesn't get us to that second crime. Second part of this, we still haven't heard explicitly how that second crime is tying in to the first crime. Remember, otherwise this is a misdemeanor. And Howie, I think this is really important. There are 2 attorneys on this 12-person jury.
That's true.
How will those attorneys react maybe differently than a layman juror would to the larger context here? I just find it almost impossible to believe that 12 jurors are going to find beyond a reasonable doubt that this case has been proven, given the weaknesses of the Cohen testimony.
We may find out pretty soon as we're nearing the end. Marie, there were certainly part of the cross-examination was devastating, but there were also these blind alleys. Did Michael Cohen learn of the Trump indictment before the New York Times? Well, what about the harassing phone calls from the 14-year-old? Who cares? What about he really wanted a White House job or he just wanted to be considered for ego reasons? Who cares? Well, why did they spend time on that?
It's really unclear. And look, I actually think other networks and, of course, Fox have been covering this pretty down the middle. You heard a lot of people from CNN and MSNBC saying Cohen didn't do great under cross-examination. But a lot of legal analysts, including in our network, saying the Trump team, especially in the first day of questioning, really went down some rabbit holes, didn't seem to be focusing like they should. At one point, the judge even admonished, this was during the Stormy Daniels testimony, the judge sort of admonished the Trump team for not objecting more. So, Trump has to find lawyers who will defend him in all of these various criminal cases, and we'll see if they're doing a good enough job here and the other one.
Well, Clay, Trump's lawyer, Todd Blanche, did lead Michael Cohen through a litany of lies. I mean, everybody knew this was coming, and the prosecution had tried to soften up by bringing some of this up earlier. But you had lying to Congress. You had lying to the special counsel. You had lying to the press. Some of the details may have been hard for the jurors to follow, but Blanche got to call him a lying liar over and over again. And I guess the question is, what's the impact on the jury?
Well, I think the impact on the jury should be substantial. And the reports are, again, we can't see it, but the reports are that the jury has been paying a great deal of attention and seemed very alert during the course of the testimony, which would suggest they hadn't made up their mind and they found this to be as explosive and revelatory as many of us did based on the reports that we have seen. I also think the larger context here. To me, this is clear grounds for a mistrial. I've argued, and this is me putting on my lawyer hat here, Howie, that Stormy Daniels testifying to the specific nature of her alleged sexual encounter was clearly prejudicial. The prejudice exceeded the probative value. It isn't necessary for this case. I think that there was a initial complaint that was made by the Trump team about that testimony. And then when you have Merchan, the judge himself, saying, oh, you should have objected more, well, that's a sign that he agreed that a lot of this information shouldn't have gotten in. I actually think, and I'd be curious what others will say.
Right.
Yeah, that a directed verdict is appropriate here, because I don't think that the legal charge has been proven to even be able to go to the jury. Now, I doubt that Merchan will be willing to grant it, but it will certainly be made at the end of the testimony.
All right, I got to make this last point, which is public interest seems to be much lower than certainly I would have expected. We did some research. About 4 million people watched on the 3 cable news networks during the time that it was on. And if you look at the first day, Monday, that Michael Cohen testified, versus the first Monday before the trial, Fox was down single digits, CNN was up single digits, MSNBC was up 45%. So you can tell which audience is really into this and would love to see Donald Trump convicted, and that's why you see that remarkable spike. All right, we'll see you after the next segment, guys, after the break. A firsthand account of what it was like inside the courtroom.